Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on YouTube. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies.
Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, whatever, your evangelist of the imagination, you know, the names you all call me. Or, as John Campion once said, your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett. And I'm coming at you from the Robservatory, and this is Robservations, episode number 803. My God, 803 episodes of Robservations. I can't believe it. You probably can't believe it either. You know, Comic-Con's over. We're in the wake of all that great, juicy information that we were provided. It was a lot of fun, Comic-Con. I first went to Comic-Con in 1988. So, 2022, that's a long time to go to Comic-Con. A lot of changes have happened. You know, after my first Comic-Con, the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation had wrapped up. The 87-88 inaugural season, 26 episodes that began with Encounter at Farpoint and ended with the Neutral Zone. The reintroduction of the Romulans. We're back, baby, with a great D'Derdex starship. That was, lest we forget, powered by an artificial singularity, which I guess they forgot about in the burn, you know, in Discovery, because not everyone uses dilithium to power their starships. But hey, we'll get into that. So anyway, you know, it was a good Comic-Con. And of course, at Comic-Con, they debuted the trailer for Star Trek Picard Season 3. And of course, Star Trek Picard Season 3 is supposed to give the characters the send-off that they apparently didn't get. You know, did they not get a send-off? I mean, All Good Things was pretty great, of course. Nemesis, maybe not so much. And you know, I mean, I a lot of people who know me know that I have let's call it pretty much a vehement hatred of all Star Trek that has come out since 2009. Really not much of a fan. And a lot of people are always asking me, you know, why is that? Why is that, Rob? You know, Star Trek is your jam. You love Star Trek. You made a movie with William Shatner. You were a Star Trek consultant for Viacom licensing in the 90s. Yes, I was. I know, right? I worked on the $80 million Star Trek experience, editing all the videos you saw as you went through that attraction, the first iteration of those videos. And, of course, I worked for CBS for 3 years with Roger Lay Jr. producing all the documentaries on the TNG, Blu-ray, the Restoration, and then, of course, on the Enterprise Blu-rays. And we created over 50 hours of brand new programming for CBS. And, I mean, you know, I don't have to explain to people that I love Star Trek. Everyone knows. Everyone also knows that I really dislike modern Star Trek a great deal. And people always go like, well, why, Rob? What is it about modern Star Trek that you hate? And I have to say, it's not just modern Star Trek. I've been highly critical of a lot of Star Trek. I think to be a Star Trek fan, you're also highly critical of Star Trek. Lately, I've noticed that people just like Star Trek. If there's the branding on it, Star Trek, people will just like it. And if you dare criticize it, wow, people get pissed. But what's really interesting to me about my own journey through Star Trek fandom, or anyone's journey through Star Trek fandom, is that More, I think, it's funny. Rick Berman said a funny thing to us when we were interviewing him for the Next Generation Blu-rays. He said, "You know what built the internet? Pornography and Star Trek." That's a true quote from, well, I'm paraphrasing what Mr. Berman said. But of course, what Rick meant was that more quote-unquote ink was spilled across the interwebs discussing Star Trek. And then, of course, there was everybody who was trying to find their favorite pornography on the internet. And that's what brought people to the internet. And I have to say, he wasn't wrong. The first time I encountered a BBS board, my college roommate, John Parcan, he was into computers. He set up a computer on our dining room table when I was at USC in 1988. And he goes, "Yeah, man, I'm setting up a BBS board." And I'm like, "What is that?" "It's like a bulletin board service." I'm like, "What? I don't know what that is." He goes, "Well, people can call in. They can just call in and you can chat with them on the computer screen." I'm like, "Why would they do that?" And he's like, "Well, we're going to have a Star Trek themed BBS board." I'm like, "Really?" Because yeah, you can talk to people randomly. Just talk to people. They're gonna go in, and once they know it's here and they get the number and it spreads, you'll be able to talk to people all night about Star Trek. And I'm like, "That's really cool. I mean, I'm gonna try and do that." And I did. So that was my first experience in 1988 on John Parcan's BBS board. I'd moved to California from Seattle to go to USC, and I would spend my nights talking to anonymous people on the internet. And back then, all we had was a green text screen. That was it. There's no graphics. I mean, yeah, sometimes you'd play like soft porn adventure that would take you an hour to load up on a cassette tape. No, by 88 it was faster. But we would just talk Star Trek, and you'd have these discussions about every aspect of Star Trek. And of course, I don't think any fictional pop culture program ever had as much written about it or books published. I mean, I've got one of my favorite Star Trek possessions is Star Trek Maps, which I think came out in 1980. And it was two big pull-out posters that were two-sided that had the entire Star Trek, the Milky Way, as Star Trek had presented it to us up through 1980. It came out post-motion picture, so it had obviously nothing from Next Generation onward. But what was awesome was it came with a book like this, printed on newsprint, of navigating starship navigation. Like it's the most insane thing ever. And what fictional TV show has this? I mean, it's as if it was almost like a textbook. If you were studying astrophysics or something, or astronavigation, you would get this book. And off the top of my head, I don't know who wrote it. This was a Star Trek artifact that was hard to get. And it was, if you can find copies of it, I mean, it's been supplanted by like Larry Nemechek's Star Charts and other things. But I mean, Star Trek had all this stuff. And then my favorite things were these books, The Best of Trek, and The Best of Trek from Trek, the magazine for Star Trek fans. And they were just essays people had written on every arcane element of Star Trek, the original series. When these were written, all we had was the 79 episodes of the original series and the 22 episodes of the animated series. That's it. That was it. And then, of course, you had the Bantam Star Trek novels of the 70s, which, let's face it, most of them weren't great. Some of them were okay, like 1980's The Galactic Whirlpool that was actually written by David Gerrold. That was pretty good. And like The Starless World and World Without End by Joe Haldeman. So there was some crazy stuff. Kathleen Sky's books, Vulcan, Spock with a hot babe and giant ants on the cover, not my jam. So even back in the 70s, when I was a kid, there were Star Trek books I liked and Star Trek books I didn't like. I was very much a Star Trek snob. And to me, here's the key to my understanding my fandom. Star Trek is a fictitious period piece from the future about a future that is not our future, but it's very much its own thing. When you buy into Star Trek, and this is another thing I used to hate, a pet peeve of mine was, as the years went by, everybody tried to make our history Star Trek's history. Like Star Trek, famously, the eugenics wars were fought in the 90s, and Greg Cox wrote these great Star Trek novels about Khan that had Gary Seven in them, and he tried to pretend like the eugenics wars really happened, we just didn't know about it, which is, I thought, a weird choice. I mean, I like the books, but Star Trek's history, I mean, we shared history, kind of like From the Earth to the Moon now, but it wasn't entirely, I mean, the broad strokes happened, but there was no nuclear weapons platform that Gary Seven had to come back and fix. in Assignment Earth. There was none of that stuff. So Star Trek was a fictitious period piece from the future. And it was, to me, it was immutable. What happened in Star Trek, that's what happened. You couldn't, there was no, it was immutable. You can't change it. That's what happened. You're seeing what happened. You can't go back and and so when I was a kid, it pretty much was pretty sacrosanct, Star Trek history. And of course, when Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek the Motion Picture comes out, Star Trek fans are all up in arms about the Klingons. Well, Rob. Well, here's the funny thing about that. Even when I was a kid, I was 12 years old, and Star Trek: The Motion Picture came out. In my mind, it's like, look, there are all different kinds we have all different kinds of ethnicities on Earth. So it only stands to reason that in a alien, empire like the Klingon Empire, we saw all kinds of different humanoids that were part of the Federation. Why did we only think Klingons looked like one way? Because those are the only people that we saw. And then people came up with explanations for it. Like the Klingons we saw in the motion picture, and then subsequently in Star Trek The Next Generation, were part of the Imperial Klingon race. Like they were the Imperial, the 100% real Klingon race. Narul Ilyanis sends in a sticker and says, "You're loving this." Well, I'm glad you are. Thank you for that. I like your name. I hope I didn't butcher it too badly. But so we were practiced. Star Trek fans were practiced, and when something happened that was not canonical, we'd figure out ways to reconcile it in our own minds. That was part of fandom. And like one of the great books that came out in the wake of Star Trek the Motion Picture was the Star Trek Spaceflight Chronology. And Rick Sternbach, yes, that Rick Sternbach had done a lot of these great illustrations for it. And it laid out the history of the Star Trek universe, kind of a fictitious history, beginning with the moon landing and going all the way up through the 23rd century to the launching of the refit Enterprise. So Star Trek was always dealing with lore. And then as new Star Trek stuff came out, it would violate the lore, and you had to then reconcile it all. So this was not new. This was not new. When you're watching this stuff, it's not like for Star Trek fans, we haven't had to deal with changes in the lore, because we always have. It's always been a part of it. But for the most part, and the people that were writing for Best of Trek, and then for the most part, it was pretty, it stayed pretty straight. Yeah, people are going to throw at me like, well, Rob, the United Federation of Planets wasn't introduced till the second season of Star Trek. It was UNESPO's, the United Earth Space Probe Agency. But here's the thing. In my mind, I'm like, the United Earth Space Probe Agency did not negate Starfleet or the Federation. They were all just different parts of whatever that galactic government was. So I'm like, okay, they just didn't mention it. And yeah, there are times when Spock says, one of my ancestors was Vulcanian. But then you could sit there and go, well, maybe he was just kind of trying to cover up. Like, he didn't lie, he exaggerated, And he just didn't want to deal with saying that, I don't know you well enough to tell you my mom's a human being. So there was all kinds of that all the time, that now you get it thrown back in your face. Well, Star Trek lore has always been, it's always changed. Well, that's true. It has. But for the most part, one of the great things about Star Trek was it was always moving forward. I mean, and yes, when Star Trek The Next Generation came out, the first two seasons are a little rough. I would say there's some great moments in there, but the funny thing about Star Trek The Next Generation was they were trying to capture lightning in a bottle twice, and they were trying to recreate something from 20 years previous. Rather than embracing the fact it was 20 years later and we're 100 years in the future, you could do a lot more. And, of course, David Gerrold and Dorothy Fontana that came back to work with Gene and later Rick Berman and to create this show with Mike Okuda and Rick Sternbach and Andy Probert and all the guys that were trying to make Star Trek happen. They were doing their best. But the first two seasons of Star Trek, for the second season was dealing with a writer's strike. The first season was dealing with, they had massive writing turnover, because I can only imagine the pressure. But, they cast characters in Star Trek The Next Generation that became beloved. But Star Trek The Next Generation didn't really become the Star Trek The Next Generation we know and love until the third season, with the addition of Michael Piller. Michael Piller joined the writing staff, and he didn't necessarily particularly have a background in science fiction, but he basically did, in a nutshell, a very smart thing. He said, the first two seasons of the show, our characters are dealing with threats from without. stuff's coming to us and we're dealing with it. The universe is coming at us. And he made a fundamental change in the way Star Trek stories were told that resonated even to this day. Well, it resonated up to the end of Enterprise, really, which was all of our stories have to be about our main characters, first and foremost. So we have this ensemble cast, and of course you could say that there's not a Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, but there was, say, Picard, Data, and Worf sort of became the interesting troika. Of course, Riker was there and all that, and so was Gates and Geordi and Deanna Troi. But the stories had to be about our people, and it became much more humanistic. And the third season of Star Trek The Next Generation is arguably, even though there was a lot of tumultuousness going on in the writing staff and all that, it was still a very difficult show to make. They were always under the gun, but the stories really changed. And as Ira Stephen Bear will tell you, because he only worked on one season of Star Trek The Next Generation, it was the third season, and when he came on, the show had already gone to hell, as he put it. And it was a difficult show to write for. You know, it was a really, really difficult show to deal with. And but Michael Piller came in the third season and fundamentally changed Star Trek The Next Generation. Now, you could say there's still some great episodes. Measure of Man, Melinda Snodgrass's Measure of Man is a second season episode, a high point of the series. Q Who, the introduction of the Q that Rob Bowman directed, that Maurice Hurley wrote. Great episode. Even in the first season, you have things like The Big Goodbye. You have an episode I love that people seem to not like, but 11001001, the Binar episode that introduces Minuet. I love that episode. You know, Coming of Age is a good episode. Heart of Glory, the first Klingon episode. Great episode. Vaughn Armstrong, one of the kick-ass Klingons, doesn't get enough credit. We later saw him as Admiral Forrest on Enterprise. He also was the Klingon in the Star Trek Experience in Vegas, the Klingon captain. But anyway, so after the second season of Star Trek The Next Generation, they fundamentally changed the show. It really did change. It feels different. The writing feels crisper. The stories become more relevant. It feels like it's a more adult show. I don't mean adult like boom, chicka, wow, wow. I mean more adult like telling more adult stories. People seemed more adult. But my love of Star Trek was steeped not just in the shows themselves, but in all the books and all the lore. And it wasn't like, well, this isn't canonical. The animated series was absolutely canonical because it was created by Gene Roddenberry, and it was a lot of the original scriptwriters wrote it. The actors came back and provided voices. And sure, the animation was limited, and you could sit there and go. And another interesting thing that happened with the animated series is that Alan Dean Foster wrote the Star Trek logs, and he would novelize and put in novel form the animated series episodes. And as the Star Trek log series went along, he would turn I think he turned like Bem into an entire book. And so the animated series got a lot more love and a lot more an in-depth, each episode got a lot more in-depth examination. So even though you're watching an animated version of it, when you read Alan Dean Foster's novelizations of the stories, and sometimes he took a lot of wild departures, but you watched it, or you read them, and suddenly the animated series took on this sort of larger-than-life this thing. And what was really interesting, especially with Star Trek novels beginning in the 80s when pocketbooks took it over in the wake of Star Trek the motion picture, a lot of the novels were, the people that were writing Star Trek novels in the 80s were huge Star Trek fans. Not that there weren't Star Trek fans before, like Sandra Marshak and Myrna Colbreth, but what the novels would do was they would extrapolate upon things that would happen in a Star Trek episode and create backstories for those things or bring them into the future or do lots of really interesting things that really made the universe live and breathe beyond the episodes. Everybody that was writing books was not doing it to get paid. They were writing books because they loved Star Trek. And there was a love of and people had encyclopedic knowledge of the episodes. And that's why they were working on these books in the first place. So for the most part, all of this stuff that the engine, I mean, in the 80s, you got Star Trek the Motion Picture in 79, but you got Star Trek the Motion Picture. Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan was June of 82, and Star Trek 4 was Star Trek 3 was June of 84, and then Voyage Home was in November of 86, and Final Frontier was was it June of 89. And then, of course, Next Generation debuted in September of syndicated, so it wasn't one day on the same day around the country, but in '87. And Next Generation came back and did contradict a lot of what we'd heard about the original series. So, but for the most part, because it took place 100 years or 80 years in the future, it still was moving Star Trek forward. So this lore and this universe was constantly growing. I mean, whether it was the motion picture, even though it was supposedly 5 years after the original series, it felt everything in Star Trek the Motion Picture. I know people didn't like the costumes, but they tried to take the Star Trek universe forward, and they extrapolated it, everything in it, communicators on wrists instead of that they could be taken, or you'd lose them on a mission. And you had all kinds of upgrades. The ship was upgraded. Hello, Gilbert. How are you, buddy? So everything was kind of, it was always moving forward. And Star Trek moved forward from 1966 all the way to 2005 to the end of Enterprise. Even though Enterprise was a prequel series, it was trying to show a lot about the founding of the Federation. And, of course, in the fourth season, you got to see a lot of what they had wanted the show to become in the first place. I mean, it was the idea of Rick Berman and Brandon Braga, who created that series, that the first season of Enterprise was going to take place entirely on Earth. And the end of that season was going to end with the launching of the NX-01, the prototype experimental Enterprise. But of course, they had to deal with a lot more network interference, so they weren't able to do that, which was unfortunate because the original conception of Enterprise, which is going to be about the founding of the Federation and maybe eventually the Romulan War and all that, was going to be as lore driven as they could possibly make it. Well, anyway. So go back to Next Generation when Michael Piller came aboard on the third season. Now, as everyone knows, I have been a very vocal critic of Star Trek starting in 2009 with J.J. Abrams' Star Trek film that, people like. I am not one of those people. There's not a whole lot about Star Trek 09 that I like. Mostly because I don't recognize the characters and I don't recognize... It isn't Star Trek to me. And there's also, in my mind, a fundamental, complete misunderstanding of what Star Trek is all about. And it's never more apparent to me than in the Kobayashi Maru scene in Star Trek 09, which is played as a joke. It's not credible. It has no verisimilitude. It makes no sense at all. And then if you watch the deleted scenes, Kirk didn't even reprogram the simulator. He sexed up a lovely Orion slave girl, actually just an Orion girl because you can't say that anymore. And he got her to reprogram the simulator, which I guess is if you can do that. I mean, it's decidedly unwoke, but it made Kirk look like a monumental douchebag. And I love Chris Pine as an actor. The way Kirk is written in Star Trek 09 is ridiculous. And I hate it. I mean, Star Trek 09 might be the dumbest science fiction movie ever made. Here you have a villain who has been sent back in time almost 100 years, and his whole raison d'etre to be pissed off is that his homeworld, Romulus, was destroyed by some supernova that threatens the galaxy. I mean, the science, the great scientific geniuses that wrote this script, I'm like, come on, man. So this guy's gone back in time. He's pissed off because his planet's blown up, but apparently back in Romulus, they never had time travel stories because he went back 100 years into the past, and it's like, okay, I'm really mad because everybody I know is dead, but I've been flung 100 years in the past and I have future technology. Why don't I go back to the Romulan homeworld and warn everyone that in 100 years, the Hope Star is going to go nova and destroy the planet, and we have 100 years to prepare, and you have all this great future technology that I'm going to bring you. No, he doesn't do that. I know they cut out a scene when the Klingons captured them and incarcerated them for 25 years, which also doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it was just not smart. It wasn't smart. Our villain's really dumb. And I'm like, bruh, you're going to go blow up planets instead of going and warning your homeworld, potentially saving all the people that you were mad about because they all got blown up. And you're not going to do that? I guess there wouldn't be a movie. But, Kirk's an idiot, and Spock is an emotional wreck through that entire movie. He's crying over the death of his mom. He's bitching and moaning, complaining about everything else. He gets mad on the bridge. He's having a relationship with Uhura. I'm like, who is this person? This is not Spock. And don't give me that, he's a younger version of Spock. He hasn't come into his own yet. No. That's not how it works. Spock, well, it's not, that doesn't work that way. But anyway, And then we get, of course, Star Trek Discovery, which was one man's vision that was deeply compromised. And Star Trek Discovery, all it was one retcon after another. What is a spore drive? You know, it's funny, in the original conception of Star Trek Discovery, I've talked about this before, there was a tardigrade character. There was a big tardigrade character that worked in engineering with Stamets named Ephraim. And that's where the tardigrade character came from. And then, of course, you can see how the writers of Star Trek Discovery took all of these ideas that had already been previously mapped out and borrowed them and changed them all around. It's like, oh, you know what? I just watched Dune. Let's fold space. What can we do in Star Trek? How can we fold space and go anywhere in the universe we want? Oh, let's have a spore drive. Well, in the original version, that was all about terraforming, but, you know, whatever. Anyway, long story short, this is a long 30-minute preamble to get to the point. What is the point? The point is this. I hated Star Trek Picard seasons 1 and 2. I hated them. None of it made any sense. None of it was really thought through. Things changed on an episode-by-episode basis. And I know the show was more about Patrick Stewart as Patrick Stewart than it was about the character of Jean-Luc Picard. I couldn't deal with the whole first season that had the dumbest portrayal of androids. It was so... Like, first of all, if you have a civilization and you're going to create sentient life forms, why do they all look humanoid? Like, if you could build self-aware AI, like, wouldn't you build, like, giant machine-like AIs that look like, I don't know, giant insects that could literally build starships in orbit? And why do they have to look humanoid? And just because they look humanoid, everyone's going to treat them badly? Like, I understand your slave metaphors and all that, but come on. It was just, I couldn't get past it. So anyway, I really did not like Star Trek Picard season 1 and 2, like, at all. And anyone who's watched this channel knows I didn't. Now, what I'm about to say is going to seem, for all of you, I don't know, maybe you're going to find it to be, they're going to be like, Rob, what's happened to you? Well, I'm not going to say how or why, but let's just say that I have experienced Star Trek Picard Season 3. Yes, Star Trek Picard Season 3 has been entirely shot, with the exception of perhaps one scene. Has been entirely shot already. It has been edited together. There are temp effects. There's music. And if one was so inclined and one had the wherewithal and one had, say, friends in, I don't know, Europe that had certain links, maybe one could, if you knew the right people, if you knew, it is Paramount after all, Raiders, if you knew top men or knew top women, and you knew where their warehouse was that had the Ark of the Covenant, maybe you could figure out a way to actually see what they had of Star Trek Picard Season 3. Or maybe I just read scripts. Maybe I watched, I don't know, storyboards of all the episodes. Who knows how it happened? But it happened. So I can say that I have a pretty good experience of all 10 episodes of Star Trek Picard Season 3. And I can say, without trepidation and without malice or without, I don't know, call it what you want, I loved it. I loved Star Trek Picard Season 3 because it felt, for the first time, when you're watching Picard 1 and 2, everybody is unrecognizable. Captain Picard, now Admiral Picard, he does not act like Admiral Picard. He doesn't sound like Admiral Picard. He doesn't talk like Admiral Picard. Why would Admiral Picard go home to his chateau that he never liked in the first place and write books? You know, why? None of it made any sense to me at all. None of it had any verisimilitude. It did not feel real. None of it. None of Picard's Season 1 and 2. The acting, the production design, the characters, I didn't buy any of it. None of it. I didn't buy any of the new lore, the Qualat Malat, whatever. I didn't buy any of it. None of it. None of it felt real. What it felt like was a bunch of people who got together to make this story. They didn't really think it through before they did it, and they were adding all this stuff that they wanted to add, but it felt like it was a Star Trek show that was made by people that didn't really watch Star Trek, and they didn't have. Right now, Star Trek is in a very interesting position. It has a pop culture memory, but it's like the Mandela effect. It's People think they know about Star Trek, like James T. Kirk is like this womanizing, rule-breaking. He really isn't like that. And if you actually go back and you watch the show, it's like, oh, and people's memories of Star Trek are these kind of warped and skewed pop culture memories that have gone through a game of telephone. But watching Star Trek, if you go back and you actually watch episodes, and here's another thing, I will freely admit, if you watch episodes of if you watch the original series, it is very difficult for you, let's say you're in your mid-20s, or even in your mid-30s, it is extremely difficult to go back and watch Star Trek and take it seriously. Because the way it looks, the effects, the acting, the way television was made, it is extremely hard to take it seriously. So the first impulse for anybody, especially the people that are working on modern Star Trek, the first impulse is to, we can make this better. Everything. And the problem is they can make it better. Well, as everyone knows, I'm all about authorship. The thing is, the original series, the stories were written by writers that were novelists and playwrights and short story writers. They were true writers that were very deft in working in very different mediums and different genres. They were real writers. They were not writers that became writers because they went to an Ivy League school and watched a lot of TV when they grew up. These people were real writers. And I'm not saying the people that write in television aren't real writers, but television writing is a very particular, it's kind of like being in Taken. It's a particular set of skills with a very particular mindset. And that mindset, by the way, has been skewed over the last 10 years. We all know from who and what and all of that. I mean, identity politics has played a part, and the producers of Star Trek now have obviously made a point to say that they use Star Trek as a device, a messaging device. So, by the way, we have, let's see, before let me pause there, and Nick Parrish. Hello, Nick says, long time, Rob, so I'm concerned about the MCU. I was mixed on Mrs. Marvel, and She-Hulk looks like it may be too goofy with suspect CG. I don't know, I think the CG on the Hulk and She-Hulk look pretty good on that new trailer. But remember, it's a reflection of the comics. I'm still excited about the MCU. I really am. I think the MCU could be pretty good. My friend Sonny Dominguez, who was down at Comic-Con, he's been a hero, PGS hero, member of the channel for 14 months. Sonny says, what if the last scene needed to be filmed for season 3 was a sequence saying the whole scene was just a dream? Who shot JR? Well, I'm going to get to that. 200 Watt Studios says, not to defend the abysmal Star Trek 09, but Romulus Nero went back. The Romulus Nero went back to was an alternate Romulus in a different timeline, not his. But it would have been nice if Nero went to visit it for his own emotions. But no, JJ only does revenge. Well, now, wait a minute, 200 Watt Studio. When the Narada came back through time, it wasn't an alternate universe yet, theoretically. When the Narada destroyed the Kelvin, that's when the universe changed and it became an alternate timeline, because that's not what happened in the previous timeline. So when the Narada first came back, it didn't have to destroy the Kelvin, and it was essentially the same timeline, maybe. I know that's arguable, but yeah, JJ only does revenge. You're right. So, but yeah, and even so, that doesn't mean that, let's say it was a different universe. Nero didn't necessarily know that, or maybe he did, but they didn't address that. The Robo producer says, Rob, thus far you aren't a Picard fan, but Q, trailer season 3, TNG One Last Mission, really hoping Spiner voices the ship's computer. Hashtag Riker out. Well, let's, Halogen Helix joined the channel. Thanks, Halogen Helix, for becoming a member. Let's jump to the point. Star Trek Picard season 3. Why am I excited about it, and why should you be excited about it? Because there's new management. And the new management is showrunner Terry Matalas. Now, before you throw that, well, Rob, he wrote episodes in season 2. Yeah, he did. He was hired to write episodes in season 2, and he did. He wrote, he wrote the best episode of season 2. But here's the thing. Everybody else, Alex Kurtzman, Michael Chabon, Akiva Goldsman, they all moved on. Star Trek Picard Season 3 was conceived of and executed by Terry Matalas. And if you listen to the Inglorious Treksperts interview with Terry Matalas, you will be, I think, heartened to hear what he has to say about Star Trek. Now, I looked up, I wanted to see what he had to say. And here's an interview that he did that the Trek movie did with him. One of the most anticipated things, this was by the Trek movie staff. It was published on June 18th. One of the most anticipated things going on right now is the main cast of Star Trek The Next Generation coming together for the third and final season of Star Trek Picard, which has already been filmed and is expected to arrive in early 2023. The reunion is the vision of executive producer Terry Matalas, who is the sole showrunner for Season 3, meaning no Akiva Goldsman, no Alex Kurtzman, although he consults with them. Is the vision of executive producer Terry Matalas. A lifelong Trek fan, Matalas began his Hollywood career as a production assistant on Star Trek Voyager. Leaving the franchise after Enterprise, Matalas successfully rose through the ranks to become showrunner on another series, Sci-Fi Channel's 12 Monkeys, before returning to Trek for the second season of Picard. In an excellent extended discussion on the latest episode of the Inglorious Treksperts podcast, Matalas discusses his long career in and out of Star Trek, and he offers a lot of insight into the upcoming third season of Picard and how it could be setting up another Trek series. You can listen to the full podcast below, but we've pulled out some of the highlights. This is Terry Matalas. This is a quote from Terry. I grew up Sunday afternoon on the couch with my dad as young as 8, watching the original series. But I'd say my first falling in love was Star Trek 2, 3, and 4. You know what? I'll throw 5 in there. 6, that would be an event. We would go to the movies to find out the next chapter of Captain Kirk. It was actually Star Trek 3 where I remember vividly the Enterprise pulling up to space dock and the Excelsior and all those things and feeling like the majesty of Starfleet, and just with today's ILM visual effects, and it left such an impression on me. So much so that you'll see a lot of space dock in Season 3 of Picard, but it felt like a fleet. It felt like the Navy I loved so much. And again, that goes back to the original series. Makes bosun whistle sound and all that stuff, which I made sure in Picard Season 3 is just everywhere. Well, he says so much so that you'll see a lot of space dock in Season 3 of Picard. I will elaborate on this. Yes, you do see a lot of space dock in Season 3 of Picard. I'm not going to tell you what it is or why it's there. It's space dock, but it's been repurposed to do something else. And Terry was not lying when he talks about that you'll see a space dock in Season 3, but it felt like a fleet. It certainly does. It felt like the Navy I loved so much. You can tell from this quote, the man gets it. He understands what Star Trek is supposed to be all about. And when asked if he sees optimism as a core component that should be in all of Star Trek, his answer swerved into Season 3 hints again. This is Terry Matalas saying, I think all of these things are true, but not necessarily absolute. Is Wrath of Khan, which some people would arguably pick as one of their favorite Star Trek things, is that an optimistic movie? I guess it's about new life, but then I would argue, doesn't all good drama always lean towards optimism in which good and love prevail? So I don't know if it's a hard and fast rule of Star Trek. It certainly wants to be your North Star. There's a moment in Season 3, which I'm cutting right now. It's very much in the respect of those movies. But there was a moment I was like, this episode has to at least come to the conclusion of incredible optimism and sense of wonder, and having Picard see a science fiction thing that makes him go, wow. And I think that is an important aspect of Star Trek. I can say that there is a moment in Star Trek Picard Season 3, I think episode 4 or 5, that there is a genuine, very Star Trekian moment with a tremendous sense of wonder in it. Here's a tweet that Terry Matalas made. If you know, you know. Star Trek Picard. This is, of course, the bosun's whistle that we saw in Star Trek 2. And Matalas had talked about how and when he joined Season 2 of Star Trek Picard, he saw he had some different ideas from the other executive producers and showrunners. When I came on to Season 2 of Picard, I was in the writer's room with these giants. It was Michael Chabon and Akiva Goldsman and a host of other really brilliant writers. Well, we'll see. Or we know better. And we all started to pitch ideas. All of them were Star Trek ideas, and all of them were different. Like Michael's Star Trek, what he loves about Star Trek, we share elements of it, but it's different than mine. And it's different from Akiva, which is very different. And then I have a different one. So it's something I never really thought of. And I thought it was extraordinary that in that room, which is this, these are all valid Star Treks. For me, it's a story of friendship. I think it is really interesting, the crew and their bonds with these insurmountable odds and coming together, but it's different for everybody. In a weird way, Picard has become a kind of anthology. Season 1 is very different from Season 2. From Michael's vision to Akiva's deep dive into deconstructing Captain Picard, and Season 3 is different from those two. All of them, though, with the focus of Picard now dealing with some emotional aspect of his life. That's important. For his season, Terry returns to the TOS movie-era focus, which played into how he pitched Season 3, particularly to the TNG cast. Say what you want about Nemesis, bad or good, it didn't feel like the end of those characters. They needed to send off, and that was the core pitch to Patrick Stewart and all of them. I called every one of them, and I said, I want to talk to you about your characters and where you think their characters are, and I want to send you all off the way that Star Trek VI was a pretty great send-off to the original crew. When asked if being on set with all these legacy stars was overwhelming as a fan, Matalas said it was especially hitting him now while he's in post-production. You had them all the time. There was one moment in particular. It's a legendary moment, let's just say. I will say they're all reunited, and there's some things going on, and I remember turning to my assistant and saying, right now I should be in tears, but I'm too fucking stressed to get this right, because I don't want to fuck it up. That's the key. The moments really hit me in post where now I can watch that moment, and if it's not Patrick, Frakes, LeVar, Gates, and Marina, and Michael, it's Picard and Riker and Geordi, and the music is up, and one of the things I've been spending a lot of time on right now is the music. It's very much in the spirit of Jerry Goldsmith and James Horner, and when you see these moments with the score, then that hits. You're like, oh my God, we did this. As he discussed these special moments, he talked about how Season 3 will include familiar characters beyond the TNG cast. And funny enough, there are moments that are, because there are just some people who came back from Star Trek in this season that aren't just like the Next Gen cast. There's one character who was in Next Gen who I was like, I really want this character to come back. And when they did, that was weirdly more thrilling than everyone else in totality. Picking up on how hard it was to pitch the TNG reunion, Matalas talked about how the cast was involved and contributed their own ideas as well. When we sat down with Patrick for the first time, it's like this absolutely feels like what we should do, and Patrick had a key idea, which was an element of the story that was absolutely pivotal to the focus of it. He also revealed how much each character fits into the season. I didn't want to make anything that they didn't want to make. They all have big things to do. We meet them and find out where they are now, and some of those answers as to what they've been doing now are unexpected. So I wanted them to be happy and have input. They've lived with these characters. They go to the conventions. They know the stories that matter to these people. For Gates, I wanted to make sure that Crusher really had a very strong story. It's a fascinating character who let her son go off into the universe and who had once had a romantic relationship with Captain Picard. And where are they now? And sitting with LeVar and saying, here's what I think is going to happen to Geordi, and LeVar Burton made me cry. There was a moment when I pitched it, and he was so emotional, and I got emotional. I was like, this is one of those cool moments. Jonathan Frakes was working on Season 2, and I said, hey, I have this idea. I want to tell you about Riker, and it's a lot of Riker. And he's like, you want me to act? They had to be happy or else I wouldn't have felt good. And Brent Spiner, we had many discussions with Brent about it, and all of them brought really great ideas to it. There wasn't a stinker in the bunch. It was great. However, bringing back the TNG cast did have a downside. I think probably it's more difficult to go to the studio and say, great, we're doing this. We need to make deals now with all these legacy characters and financially what we can afford and what does that mean for some of the new cast. I think that was probably the hardest thing, that we just don't have infinite cash or runtime to do justice for the characters. So that's some of what Terry Matalas had to say. There's some interesting things that he recently tweeted out. One of them, obviously after the reveal at Comic-Con on Saturday of what the cast looks like, he tweeted this out about Worf. The sword on Worf's back is called a Kurleth, and it was designed by the creator of the Batleth, Dan Curry. And yes, you will see him use it. And I can confirm, oh yes you do. Now, how many TV producers would go back and rehire Dan Curry? to make the Kurleth, a new Klingon weapon we haven't seen. And let me tell you, it's fucking badass. And you do see Worf use it, and it is also very badass when you see what happens, especially when he's introduced. I'm not going to say what happens, but it's badass. It's really, really good. But the thing is, that's what Terry Matalas is doing. Here's something else he tweeted out. Stu Max says, Terry Matalas, are you still using the backstory that was established for Star Trek Picard originally and used in a novel that Worf took command of the Enterprise E after Picard left, or has that been changed? Terry says on Twitter, you'll just have to see. I'm just saying that's not where we meet him here. He's on another track, one related to the Dominion War. Now I've said too much. Bye. I guarantee you, no one who's been working on Star Trek since 2009 knows shit fuck all about the Dominion War. Terry Matalas does. Oh, does he? And, I think perhaps even bringing up the two words Dominion War gave away something maybe he shouldn't have, but that's not for me to say. He did it on Twitter, so hey, I'm just reporting it. But I would say this. Why do I love Star Trek Picard Season 3 so much? It feels like the best Star Trek The Next Generation movie that there ever was, spread out over 10 hours. It is a Star Trek's greatest hits. Not in a bad way, but it takes all of these elements from disparate parts of Star Trek and incorporates them into one large tapestry of a story. And a lot of those things are recognizable, but they're done in an extremely interesting and compelling way. The whole show is amazingly interesting. I really loved what I experienced of it. And I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to tell you something that this should tell you what you need to know about this show. First of all, Terry Matalas made it his life's mission to make this as good as it could be. He brought all of his love and knowledge of Star Trek and put it in this show. He mentions the music. The music is incredible. It finally sounds like, oh my God, I'm listening to a Star Trek show that has Star Trek music in it. And when you hear it, I'm telling you, you'll be like, wait a minute, did I just hear that? It's beyond, it's fantastic. It's very, very different from what we've heard. And you'll be like, wow, how were you able to do this? But there's one thing when it starts in episode 1. Do you remember in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan? I know, come on, you all remember. We just celebrated its 40th anniversary. It begins with a title card it's blue writing on black, and the blue writing is a very specific font, and it says, in the 23rd century. Star Trek Picard Season 3 begins with that exact same title card, but it says, in the 25th century. That's all you really need to know to tell you that we're off to... I was like, fuck, we're off to the races. Somebody was paying attention. Somebody went to staff meetings. Star Trek Picard Season 3 is, for longtime Star Trek fans, a joyous story. The story itself gets pretty dark and the universe is at stake, but not like some space anomaly that's going to destroy the entire Milky Way galaxy. It's nothing like that. It's personal peril. It's real peril. There is a villain who's only part of something that's much larger that's happening, but a great villain. They haven't revealed who that villain is or even who plays that villain. I'm not going to reveal it here. I don't think they talked about it. I haven't seen it reported yet, so I'm not going to say shit. Nilo Rodis, formerly... no, it's a Nilo. Nilo Rodis Jamero, but he doesn't use Jamero anymore. Nilo Rodis from ILM, that if you grew up reading books about ILM, he designed a new enemy battle cruiser, a ship that is very cool. It's very unique. It's very, very different for Star Trek, and I'll leave that for you all to discover, but it was great. Terry went after these people. Dan Curry, who created the Batleth, designed a new Klingon weapon. Nilo Rodis does a new enemy battle cruiser, a ship that we've never seen before, very unique for Star Trek. He went after a lot of other designers, and I won't talk about who they are because I don't want to reveal that. Amazing stuff. It was It was as if us, as longtime Star Trek fans, were given the keys to the kingdom, and we were able to dream up what would be the most kick-ass Star Trek story we could tell with our main characters. Now, Doomcock, I know you went after me, and I would say this. You know what? I feel your pain, but I have to say that when I don't know Terry Matalas, and I made some crack on Twitter about like, oh, who are they to say they can give the Next Generation crew a send off? I don't know what I said, and he texted me directly. It was the first time we'd ever had any contact, and he wrote to me. He said, "Well, I really liked Free Enterprise, which is a movie that I made," and I wrote back to him and I said, "I really liked 12 Monkeys," because he did the TV series. He was the showrunner of the 12 Monkeys TV series, and that was really. That was it. That was the exchange I had with him, and then we've gone back and forth, and I tag him on Twitter a lot. But 3 months ago I didn't know him. I knew he was involved in Star Trek Picard season 2, but I did like 12 Monkeys very much, and I know he worked with Brandon Braga, and so by all accounts he's a very stand-up guy. And I will say this, as they said about when Gaff said to Rick Deckard at the end of Blade Runner, he said, "You've done a man's job, sir." I can say what Terry Matalas has done surpassed what Michael Piller did with season 3 of Star Trek, The Next Generation. And it is like reading a Star Trek novel, or maybe reading an IDW Star Trek The Next Generation miniseries comic. I don't care. It was so much fun. The deep dives were deep. The characters he brings back were surprising. There's one of my favorite moments in any Star Trek show ever between a recurring Next Generation character that comes back and a conversation that person has with Picard, and it's extraordinary, and the acting was incredible. Patrick Stewart's never been better than he was. I didn't think he was particularly good in seasons 1 and 2. He's great in this season. All the principal characters are really terrific. People want to know about Data. I will leave that up to you to discover on your own. Whether or not Data shows up, or in what form he shows up, or maybe he doesn't show up at all, or we'll see. Don't want to talk about that. I just want to say that, it's always good when somebody gets an opportunity to do something great. And I think that Terry Matalas was afforded an opportunity to make Star Trek Picard Season 3 great. And he did not leave any stone unturned. And the love and affection of Star Trek and the lore and the characters is second to none. And I can't believe that he was able to do what he did. And I hope, I don't know if they're going to fuck it up in editorial, because there's still a long time before it comes out. Maybe somebody will go in and say, nope, you got to change this. I hope they don't. But let's hope his vision will endure, because it's definitely worth checking out. Come on, in the 25th century? Come on. It's good stuff. So you go, Terry Matalas. You go, because you've done a great job. And I'll stand behind you. And people think that I've become some Paramount shill and I'm being paid. Trust me, Paramount doesn't want me. I know for a fact the powers that be at Paramount and CBS are particularly angry with me. So Tom Jr. Jackson says, Rob, I'm excited for this. Greetings from the SS Goof. Well, thanks, Tom. I appreciate that. Will the designs be TNG accurate or 25% different? 200 Watt Studio, this, of course, takes place 30 years after TNG. The designs, I will say this, I fucking hate the designs in Discovery, in Strange New Worlds, and in Picard. Hate them. I hate it all. The designs in Picard are badass. In Picard Season 3 are badass. They're badass. Between the jackets people have on. I mean, I don't mean to piss anyone off, but in the last episode of Strange New Worlds, we all watched it, right? Pike goes into his future, of course, They can't come up with a new original thing. They have to have them go to a start. Here's the thing. Here's in a nutshell, this is why I hate modern Star Trek. One, everything's visually different. But when Deep Space Nine went back to a Star Trek episode, to an original series episode, they actually used footage from the original episode and inserted our characters and recreated insert shots and all that to actually go back to the Enterprise. All right? In this, they go back, they go to Balance of Terror. Of course, they can't really do it because everything's different. If they were smart, they would have done what they did in Troubles and Tribulations and used the original footage from Balance of Terror. Why not? And another thing that was really stupid that I really hated, I fucking hated that episode, by the way. Everyone's like, it's so great. No, it's not. Because one of the great things in that episode was the relationship that the Romulan commander had with his Centurion. And in this episode, they made the Centurion a douche. That relationship was adversarial. It was terrible. And it missed so much of what was good about Balance of Terror. They took one of the greatest Star Trek episodes ever, and they made a mockery of it, I thought. And people are like, but Rob, it was great. No, you just think it was great. It wasn't great. It wasn't great. But if you're going to go back and you're going to do that, use the real Star Trek episode. They can't because it's not the same thing. And didn't like it. So 200 Watt Studio, the designs feel like Star Trek The Motion Pictures designs. The designs feel, especially the Starship designs, feel that they belong in the Star Trek universe. I can say that. And I was very surprised by that. And I'm very sad Eagle Moss went out of business because there's a lot of starships that I would love to get from this show. A lot of starships. So as people who might be new around these parts, I read letters. And I have a lot of viewer letters on a lot of different subjects. I am going to read them. If you want to write a letter to me, you don't have to send me a tip or anything. It's free of charge. I will read your letters if they're good. You can send me a letter at postgeeksingularity.com. Go to the website. And I'm going to read letters, and you'll see me read letters now. So you can go write me a letter, and I'll read it right on the show. And how great will that be? Wesley Namila, he's been a member for 2 months. He says, Rob, how do we Star Trek in the future for to go beyond where no man has gone before? Rob, how would you get to Star Trek in the future? How would I get to start? Well, I mean, obviously that we're going to have to go through a lot of hardship and figure things out. That's a tough question to answer. But, I mean, what we have to do is start paying attention to, first of all, science and the world around us. And we have to start caring about the planet that we live on and the people that we live with. So anyway, I want to read a letter that comes to us from Hugo M. Hi, Rob. Long-time listener, first-time writer. My story can sound a bit cliche to many. I grew up in the 80s and found my love for sci-fi in the 90s when Star Trek The Next Generation was playing on TV at lunchtime. During my junior high school breaks, I would have lunch at my grandma's place and marvel at a world where societal struggles were a thing of the past and one could jump and explore the galaxy at a whim. It was only later, upon revisiting the series, that I really pondered the bigger topics, the existential questions, and the moral conundrums. And from there, my passion for works of future fiction that make you think and evaluate your beliefs grew and cemented. Fast forward to the 2020s, an era marked by very subpar Star Trek revivals where nuance is gone, the characters are flat, and the topics are doomsday-level bombastic but morally shallow. I have very little self-respect, so I watched it all, even the later seasons of Discovery, when it was clear just how bad it was. I still watched it because Trek is part of who I am, and I still have the hope that things will turn around. I'm right there with you. People are like, Rob, why don't you just turn it off if you don't like it? Well, because I hope it'll get better. You know where it got better? In Picard season fucking 3. Show run by Terry Matalas. So, and by the way, don't believe me. When it airs, I think it's going to air in February of 2023. Just watch it. And I'm telling you, half an hour into the first episode, you'll be like, what am I watching? I actually really like this. Not just really like it. I really, really like it. Proof's in the pudding, man. Don't listen to me. I'm just telling you, you should do it. Don't sit there and don't sleep on Picard season 3. It was clear how bad Discovery was. I still watched it because Star Trek is part of who I am, and I still have hopes that things will turn around. They almost did with Star Trek Strange New Worlds. I really enjoyed the first half of the season, but for some reason it all fell apart from episode 6 onwards. The writing became derivative, the plots wrapped up all too conveniently, and the story asked no big questions other than Pike's, should I face my own fate? But then season 3 of The Orville came along, and for those who don't know, The Orville is a Trek-like future series set in a future where a peaceful federation of planets aims to explore the galaxy led by a post-scarcity Earth. The twist, it was written by Seth MacFarlane of Family Guy and American Dad fame, and the first season is very lighthearted, heavy on the jokes and quips, and the homage to the Trek of old. Seth is a self-proclaimed huge fan of sci-fi, and it shows. He tried to build a universe that seemed familiar and yet felt new. New characters, races, enemies, and problems to solve. It was okay, but something was missing. The show was too juvenile and still with training wheels. It needed to grow. And grow it did. Season 2 abandoned a lot of the quick jokes in favor of a more serious plot line, and the recent Season 3 feels like the series has really come of age. It does not shy away from tackling human problems like suicide, relationships, mortality, gender issues, and many others, but it does so in an adult, multifaceted way. It does not shove a pretense of morality down your throat, and it plays many angles, always asking the viewer, what would you do in this situation? I strongly recommend The Orville to everyone. Have you seen it, Rob? If so, what did you think? All the best, Hugo M. Well, Hugo, first of all, thanks for writing in. Yes, I am a big fan of The Orville. One of the executive producers of that is David Goodman, president of the WGA, and of course, former writer on Star Trek Enterprise. And he's written Star Trek novels. He wrote the autobiography of Captain Kirk, which shows more of a understanding of Captain Kirk as a character than the people that wrote Star Trek 09, which, of course, one was Alex Kurtzman. But yeah, I thought that they did a very, very good job. I really like the Orville a lot. And the last couple episodes, the last episode was almost 90 minutes long. I don't love it as much as I love For All Mankind, but that's something else. But there you go. Great show. I want to thank you for writing in. Thanks for being a first-time writer to the show. And, it's nice to hear people's genre stories. How did you find your way into Star Trek and all that? Very, very cool. And I'm glad you do like The Orville. I think The Orville is a great show, and it's getting better all the time. This letter comes from Keith O'Neill. Hey, Rob, I saw you give your brief thoughts on the Zack Snyder Rolling Stone article. I did a whole show on it. As someone who was a proponent of his during the whole release of the Snyder Cut saga, I have to say I'm disappointed in what I read. I am of a few minds of the whole situation. Do I think bots were used to beef up the hashtag release the Snyder Cut? Sure. Do I think Snyder declared he would destroy Jeff Johns and John Berg on social media? No, that's something a cartoon villain will do. Did he also say after? Number 3, will I stop answering my own questions and get to the larger point? Yes. I was let down hearing Snyder tell fellow director Adam Wingard I don't control my fans when they review bombed Godzilla vs. Kong for some odd reason. That doesn't wipe his hands clean of the situation and gave Warner Brothers and the population in general the negative narrative they wanted about the whole movement. Look, I was really disappointed to read that. Why would anybody who wanted to see Zack Snyder's vision fulfilled, and I was one of those people, I never believed the Snyder Cut would actually see the light of day. And by the way, there was no Snyder Cut that was finished in any way, shape, or form to show people. Filmmakers don't want to show unfinished work. And that article, as that article said, it took over $70 million to finish it. Just like I said, it would take tens of millions to finish it. And I was always saying, it doesn't exist, it's never going to happen. Until what changed was there was somebody to actually pay for it in HBO Max. Until there was an HBO Max, that it would never happen. HBO Max made sure that it did, so good on them. But I was really disturbed that Zack Snyder wouldn't come out in support of Adam Wingard, who's one of us, who's a great filmmaker, who's given an opportunity to step up and make a giant studio picture, and kudos to him, he's doing another one. We should have been supportive. Everybody should have been supportive. Everybody who wanted the Snyder Cut to come out should have been given the same support to Adam Wingard or any other good filmmaker out there. So I agree. I love Man of Steel, Watchmen, and even like Batman v Superman, but I was never one of those zealots you see online who thought Snyder could do no wrong. The Snyder cut of Justice League could have been shorter, and dare I say it, a few elements in the Joss Whedon cut actually worked better. Don't get me wrong, Warner Brothers absolutely screwed Snyder when it came to Justice League, but as hard as it could have been at times, Snyder had to be the better man in the whole situation. I like Snyder as a director, but I lost a little respect for him. Your thoughts? Thanks, and stay metal. Respectfully, Keith O'Neill. Well, Keith, I feel pretty much the same way that you do, Keith. And he could have been more supportive. I think the whole thing, at the end of the day, the fact that we got the Snyder cut at all, I think is a big win. Everybody came out ahead. I think it was an unfortunate situation. I think the studio regime not only screwed over Zack Snyder, but they also screwed over David Ayer. They lost. Again, the executives were worried about themselves. They had the AT&T merger coming up. Everybody had their golden parachutes. Kevin Tsujihara had to worry about the affair he was having with a young starlet. I mean, there was a lot of people that weren't paying attention. I feel that I worked at Warner Brothers in feature production for a couple of years back in the late 80s, early 90s. And I worked for the senior vice president of production, Bill Hunt. I felt when I was at Warner Brothers that everybody who worked at Warner Brothers at the time, and there were some amazing people. Courtney Valenti was there. She's still there. She was in the story department, but she's still there. People like Alan Stewart, Lisa Henson, Bob Brassel, Terry, what was his name? I forget. But there was a lot of great executives there, and I always felt that they were pretty serious-minded, and everybody seemed to know their jobs. I don't feel that much anymore. I mean, I'm obviously from the outside. I mean, I was literally right in the executive offices every single day. My office was in the executive offices. Actually, it was behind the coffee maker in a little tiny room. But hey, we were there, and it was really disappointing to see what happened at Warner Brothers. But I think the whole situation was unfortunate. It didn't need to happen. And is that what Tallulah? Do you think it didn't need to happen either, Tallulah? Tallulah's here. So yeah, I think that was unfortunate. I think it was a bummer that whole thing happened. It shouldn't have happened. And yeah. David Morgan Jr. says, "Hey Rob, I'm Hitchcock the Goat on Stream Elements for your channel and John Campea. I read one of your questions today. Anyway, I noticed Robservations isn't around anymore, or I can't find it for some reason. I noticed Let's Get Physical Media, Midnight Metal, Midnight Musings, etc. that is there. And in the past, when I sent a tip to your channel, it was just before or during a Robservation show. My question is, how would I know which one of your shows would a future Stream Elements tip be read by you? Write these shows right now. On the latest Campea mailbag, you asked me to list my 5 favorite Hitchcock films. I want to reply, but I want the reply to support your channel. I don't necessarily watch the midnight shows or Let's Get Physical Media. Well, David Morgan, Let's Get Physical Media is fine, but we're doing Robservations right now. So that's pretty exciting. Yeah, so you can always write to me on these live shows, and I will read your 5 best Hitchcock movies. I'm still thinking, Wesley, about how I'd get to a Star Trek future. I don't know how I would. I think we need to start thinking about it, though. Joe Cronin. Are you related to Lee Cronin? Is Lee Cronin a real person? Joe Cronin says, all TNG movies felt weird, but I like them. Nemesis had them the closest to a TNG show, despite people hating Nemesis. I just thought Nemesis had a really good idea, but then they did a lot of stupid shit like the Remans. And the idea that, why do people not understand how cloning works? Just because you're a clone does not mean you have some kind of connection to your genetic origins. It's so weird. I mean, people just don't understand cloning. It bothers me. Go back and watch The Island. That had a better grasp of cloning. Or better yet, watch Never Let Me Go, because that movie will kill you. This Philip Bryan says, do you think the Picard era will continue? Well, this will be the last season of Picard. I don't think Picard will continue. I do think there's a possibility that a lot of the characters that we see in Picard will go on in that era and move forward. I think definitely will. Anthony Zappin says Kurtzman Trek has had 10 stinker seasons of the worst television ever between Discovery, Strange New Worlds, Picard, Lower Decks, and Prodigy. You're losing credibility shilling for Kurtzman Picard Season 3 with early access. Listen, Anthony, anyone knows on this channel I don't shill. I don't shill. I'll never tell you that I like something that I don't think is good. I don't do that. And anyone who's watched me for any length of time will tell you that. Star Trek Picard Season 3 is diametrically opposed to Picard Season 1 and 2. It's like watching a totally different show. And I loved watching it. Or if I watched it, maybe I read it. Maybe I listened to it. I don't know. I thought it was terrific. And I have no problem saying that. You think I don't hate you think I don't hate all these shows? I dislike them. I dislike them because they're wantonly not good. They could make them good, but the problem is the people that are actually working on the shows, one, they're not Star Trek fans, and two, they're not science fiction writers. And it's really frustrating. So I don't understand. I will tell you this. I love Picard Season 3. I don't think I'm losing credibility. I'll tell you, I hated Star Trek Picard Seasons 1 and 2. I had no reason. I didn't know Terry Metalis. You know, we started conversing on Twitter because he liked my movie and I liked his 12 Monkeys TV series. But I don't shill because I get early access to something. I've gotten early access to a lot of things. And if I don't like them, I don't like them. You don't shill. Just I get nothing out of saying. I mean, talk about a burned bridge. I've burned such a bridge with CBS. There's no reason for me to shill for them, and they're certainly never going to give me any money. Great show, Rob. I really hope this is from Echo Base Network. I love the guys over at the Echo Base Network. Great show, Rob. I really hope they do not ruin the rest of the cast in Picard Season 3. I also enjoyed the back and forth with Doomcock on Twitter. I understand where he's coming from, given their track record. It's true. Hey, man, no one was more surprised than I was to realize how good I thought that Star Trek Picard Season 3 was. Now, here's the thing. It's not Amadeus. And it is, like I said, it's a little bit of Star Trek's greatest hits, but there's so much in it that's so much fun. There are things in it I was like, wait. There's a couple things. I'm going to spoil something. I hope somebody doesn't get mad at me. I think I spoiled this already once before. So in the there's like almost like a throwaway dialogue exchange about the Klingon bird of prey in Star Trek for the Voyage Home, the Bounty. I won't say who's talking about it or why. I think I might have already done it drunkenly on YouTube before. But there's just this throwaway line of dialogue where they talk about how when they tried to salvage the Bounty from the bottom of San Francisco Bay, they couldn't find it at first because its cloaking device had activated. And I don't know why. I loved that. They would never do that in modern Star Trek. They wouldn't even think to do that. And it's a total throwaway line of dialogue. But it told me everything I need to know, that everybody that was working on Picard Season 3, mostly Terry Metalis, was thinking about this kind of stuff. And watching it, there's so much of that. And it's not just, that's not a member berry. That's actually expanding the lore. The idea that, you know, I've never heard anybody really address, well, what happened to the Klingon bird of prey at the end of Star Trek 4 after it crashes into San Francisco Bay right underneath the Golden Gate Bridge? And the idea that obviously it sank. They got the George and Gracie out, it sank. And then this cloaking device somehow activated and they couldn't find it. I love that idea. It's just kind of a throwaway joke, but it's funny. I mean, sure, they used scanners and found it later, but I just loved it. I love that. I thought it was great. Movie Andy says, Rob, I love hearing you talk about movies. You're so knowledgeable about film history. I found a love for film during the pandemic, and I'm studying a lot about it, and hearing your thoughts are valuable. Well, Movie Andy, that's very nice to say. I think that's one of my moderators says I was drunk on a live stream. Never. I know. I never drink on live streams. Spectrum is green. FAB, although that's a different show. So yeah. Jim Alaska said, I forget, did R&B like Picard seasons 1 and 2? You guys are funny. You guys are very funny. Now I have a super chat here. I can't believe it. My friend, let's see, my friend Martino Sulmoni, and I don't know what I deserved to have such a friend in him, but Martino, he is a great supporter of this channel. He just sent $200 in. He sent a $200 tip. I'm like, he already bought me the Playmobil Enterprise. He lives on the Swedish-Italian border. He's a crazy European that I love. Martino just sent me $200 and says, it's hard admitting to having an addiction, but no amount of Lotus driving through the Alps can beat RMB firing on all 12 cylinders. Tonight, I slept like a newborn. Welcome back. Well, Martino, thank you. And I thank you so much for your generous support of these channels, and you're a great guy, and I can't wait to come over and see your car collection at one point. I need to come over, and I've never driven in a Lotus, especially is it the Lotus that you reconstructed from the beginning of The Prisoner? Is it that Lotus? Because, man, I'd love to drive that. Well, you can drive it, but it would be a lot of fun to see. Andy H. 1971 says, "Hi, gents. Did either of you watch Tales from the Loop on Prime? It was beautifully shot, acted, and directed, including Jodie Foster and Andrew Stanton for one episode each. Andrew Stanton directed 2 episodes of For All Mankind. No one seemed to talk about the show at this time, and it didn't get a second season. I thought Tales from the Loop was beautiful. I loved it. And it's an Amazon Prime show, and it was based on a series of art, like a sci-fi art book, I believe. I really liked the show a lot. It was very lyrical. I thought it was gorgeous. And I'm not surprised nobody watched it. I mean, nobody watched that show, which was kind of a bummer. And I did feel bad about that nobody watched it, which is kind of too bad. And I don't know why that was the case. Let's see. A lot of people have been firing in tips. Let me get to them. Amber Turd. I love you guys. Amber Turd says, Rob, people like to say either shit or get off the bed. Well, I've had the squirts and I've rolled out of bed, but now I'm green and angry. I'm mad and went to court and lost, but matters still that I seem to have lost a right I thought I had as a supervillain. Well, Amber, first of all, thanks for supporting the channel. I can't help you. I don't know what to say. Rights are being taken away from Americans willy-nilly. I don't understand it. We seem to just sit back and let our rights get taken away. I don't like it. It's a bummer. I'm sorry, Amber. But I hope that the justice system, I hope it works for you. I really do. Jason S. It/thing. Are your pronouns it and thing? Is that what you're saying? I love that. Anyways, have you seen the new horror show called From on Epix? Red Letter Media recommended it, and it's really good. Anyone who travels to this town can never leave, and humanoid monsters come out every night and try to kill everyone, and there's a mystery. I have. It's funny. John Campea was approached. They paid him to tweet about the show, and he watched it, and he was like, this show is really great. And I believe it got a second season, and I've only watched the first couple episodes. It's really intriguing, and people keep saying to finish it. I can't wait. I really hope it's great. The second season is great. Here's the thing. Does the mystery pay off, though? I mean, I love the premise, and it's really genuinely creepy. So I need to catch up. Julian Mishkin says, Rob, it was so great to finally catch a Starship Smackdown live. What a ridiculously fun 2 hours. Better yet was getting the chance to meet you in person and have a drink with you and various friends afterwards. Cheers, mate. It was great to see you too, Julian. We got to do that more often. It was a lot of fun. I'm sorry it was my attention was kind of all over the place, but yeah, that was a lot of fun. It's always great to meet PGSers out in the wild. The Robo Producer, Picard Season 3, you're stoked. What of Star Trek 4 with Pine? Hey, you know what? I like Chris Pine a lot. I hope Star Trek 4 is good. I really, they'll have to convince me. I was not a fan of, I did not like Star Trek 09. I really actively could not stand Star Trek Into Darkness and Star Trek Beyond. Even though Justin Lin directed it, I was like, again, you know what? The whole Yorktown base, this might sound strange, but that didn't look like it belonged in the Star Trek universe. That whole end thing, I'm like, I just didn't dig it. What can I say? Yeah, I didn't dig it. Didn't dig it. So, will I watch Star Trek 4? Yeah, I'll watch it. I hope it's good. Soraka Vulcan says, loving the new observatory college dorm room shelving. Well, it's IKEA Billy bookcases. You know, I find that they're good. They work quite well. So I love my Billy bookcases. But I appreciate you like it. I'm still, working on things. Sean Hoover says, why didn't Kirk wear a visor when the Medusan was was beamed off the Enterprise at the end of Is There in Truth No Beauty? Spock did. Live long and prosper, Rob. Well, you know what? Kirk is that much of a badass. He can look at the Medusan and it won't drive him crazy. Kirk sees beauty everywhere. So he can look at the Medusan ambassador and he doesn't go nuts. That's why it happened. JM Nemo says, hey, sir, saw the image of the Next Gen crew and was just nerdily wondering why Worf has gray hair already. Too nitpicky? Don't Klingons age slowly and all that? Kor, Koloth, and Kang weren't even completely gray in Deep Space Nine. Hey, man, you go gray. Look at my hair. My hair's gone almost completely white in less than 6 months. I think the Pai Mei look for Worf is great. Wait till you see him in action. It's great stuff. And you know what? It doesn't look... when you see him in action, it looks great. And yeah, I mean, look, people go white, people go gray. Look at me. I've gone gray. I've gone white. That doesn't bother me. I think Worf looks terrific. But yeah, everyone's different, man. You know what I mean? There's a lot of Klingons out there. Nick Parrish, 1 of 2, says, please don't get me wrong, Rob. I've liked the majority of the MCU media, but I'm worried that we may lose the balance between suspense, drama, and comedy that the MCU has been great at establishing, and now we're going to get just straight sitcoms. Hey, look, you know what? She-Hulk's going to be a sitcom. It was designed to be a sitcom, kind of like the comic, but Secret Invasion is not. So there you go. Secret Invasion is not a sitcom. How do I know that? Let's just say I know it. I don't know it as much as I know about Star Trek Picard Season 3, but I promise you it's not a sitcom. Nick says, and as far as the CG, maybe I'm being too critical of the CG in She-Hulk. I just remember watching the 2008 Hulk movie and the Avengers Hulk, and I felt like, man, they've really made the Hulk look good. I think so too. Remember, though, we're working with a TV budget. It's not a feature film budget, so we'll have to see. But I think it looks good. I mean, we'll see how it looks. I think it works good for the show. But again, I'll have to wait and see. JM Nemo says, tell me Pulaski is in it and I'll freak. I think I'm the only Pulaski fan on the planet. You know what? Dinah Moldauer, we interviewed her. I interviewed her for Next Gen, for the Next Gen Blu-rays. What a delightful woman. I don't mean to disappoint you, but she is not in Season 3 of Picard. She is not. Sonny Dominguez, how are you? Saw the documentary Dave Stevens, Drawn to Perfection at San Diego Comic-Con. It was great as it educated me on the importance of the man. Also was introduced to Ron Cobb via a panel thanks to fellow PGSer Julian M. Any other artists that crossed over from comics to movies? I think Mike Plug is an artist that crossed over. That just off the top of my head, that's one I can. Well, and then of course other like Bill Sienkiewicz, and there's a lot of artists that kind of transitioned over or they made movies from their work. But I love Dave Stevens. I love The Rocketeer. So good. And Ron Cobb, Ron Cobb was a great illustrator, great designer. So Stubble McShave asks, did you have a good time at the Cthulhu Hentai Dungeon half a mile beneath Comic-Con? Anything you want to share? Well, let me just say that while it wasn't International Women's Day, no one celebrates International Women's Day better than they do at the Cthulhu Hentai Dungeon. The hentai. So for those of you who don't know, I revealed on Let's Get Physical Media that there is actually a Cthulhu hentai dungeon. It's a half mile beneath the San Diego Comic-Con, and it's literally, for all of you people that love anime or H.P. Lovecraft or, hentai, if you're a fan of like Bible Black or The Wandering Kid or something, I'm telling you, they built this special dungeon. It's a half mile below Comic-Con, the convention center, and it's some of the most extreme sexual deviant. It's just insane. I mean, the creatures that live down there, Cthulhu is down there. He pays visits a lot. And then a lot of these demons from around the world with their tentacles, man, the stuff they get up to in that dungeon, it's crazy, Stubble. I can't really talk about a lot of it because I saw a lot of celebs down there, and they confiscate your cameras. Obviously, they don't let you take any cameras in there. But it's pretty crazy. And, I've been going there since 1996, and it gets bigger every year. I mean, they keep excavating out the chamber. It's amazing what goes on there. It was more, you thought Hero-gasm and The Boys was great. Wait till you see this dungeon when you go down there. I mean, it's hard to get a pass. This year, I had to, like, prove my credentials over and over. I'm like, don't you know who I am? They finally let me in. Julian M. says, Rob, I think that the other Romulan character from Strange New Worlds was listed as sub-commander. I think they dispensed with the Centurion and made this guy the DCist character. Yeah, but why did they do? I agree with you, they did, but why? What was so great about Balance of Terror was the relationship the Romulan commander had with the Centurion. One of the great exchanges in Star Trek history. My gift to the homeland, another war. So good. They missed out. They missed the boat on that. Jonathan Namila. Hello, Jonathan. You've jumped over to this channel. Thank you. Rob, are the Star Trek lazy, or is it just easy to make prequel TV shows? Rob, why are they scared to go beyond Voyager? Well, they did with Picard. Frustrating. They do not boldly go beyond where no man has gone before. No one is more frustrated than me, and you're absolutely right. I appreciate the support. It's a bummer. It is a bummer. I wish they did more. Tallulah, why are you barking at me? Tallulah likes to bark. I'm on a show, Tallulah. What's up with you? Is that what you always do that? I don't have any gummy bears. I don't have any cookies. I have no dog treats. I'm sorry. So anyway, Scarpad's Comic Treks says, if there's one thing the pandemic did was to save 4K discs from certain death. Before, we'd never get obscure titles. Now they're popping like corn. I don't know about that. I think that we're getting a lot of titles were in the works. My beloved Second Sight, I just got their box set of Drive. Nicholas Winding referenced Drive, and I got their The Witch. There's a lot of companies making some great physical media. I don't think it was just because of the pandemic, though. And I think it's great. As long as we can keep getting players, buy extra players to keep them for a rainy day. Halogen Helix says, you've given me hope. As a Trek fan, it felt like I was punishing myself watching Season 2 of Picard. The teaser got me emotional. Fan since I was a boy. Well, I'm telling you, it's really good. And if you're a Next Generation fan, it's so much fun. I mean, it's a big, sweeping, rousing conspiracy action adventure whiz-bang show with some great character moments, some real peril, some real emotion. A real sense of wonder at some points. It's got a lot of starship porn in it. Not like the hentai porn, but I mean, not like, a lot of good starship action. Good starships. I like that. You're going to like it. David's Sock and Lotion says, I'm not falling for that dungeon stuff again. Lies. Listen, I'm not lying about the Cthulhu dungeon a half mile beneath the convention center at San Diego. If you know how to get there, you know how to get there. And as a matter of fact, I noticed when I was at the top of the Marriott yesterday that they've built it's like a concert venue out you go out past the back of the Marriott. They actually have a secret entrance to the underground dungeon there, and that's why they built that new venue, so you could get to the secret dungeon. So David Sock and Lotion, you can get there. I swear to God, you can get there if you want. It's hard, but you can get there. I promise. I promise you can. Let's see. Agosa, here's a good letter. This comes from Agosa Asula. Agosa Usula. Nice to write to you again, Rob. I believe that there is no age limit to studying the classics because, like I said on letters I wrote a long time ago to you, I got into the classics when I was 15, only to realize that film is an art form that can change lives in ways that are artistic and personal at the same time. Watching and studying the classics to this day has allowed me to always realize that the more I watch them, the more that my encyclopedic knowledge will continue to grow at all times. Don't get me wrong, Rob, I also like modern stuff as well as considering how versatile I am in my knowledge of film. Rob, I am well aware of the fact that some of the critics nowadays believe that they can still take film seriously without watching the classics, since the majority of those people are as young as I am. I respectfully disagree with these people because the classics are some of the best movies of all time, and without them, we would never have the modern films of today. But I understand where those critics are coming from, since they are so used to the modern films that when they see the classics, they tend to believe that they are dated, where they are not impressed with them at all. As imagination connoisseurs, we have to make sure that we continuously study the classics, while still staying modern at the same time. I say that because we should realize that the classic era, along with the modern era, should be watched together in a balanced and consistent manner so we can watch different varieties of films from different eras while still consistently looking for greatness from those different eras of films at the same time. For anybody who wants to expand and enrich their palette of films, I recommend watching Turner Classic Movies, one of my favorite channels of all time, along with film documentaries like A Personal Journey with Martin Scorsese, Through American Movies, and the CNN documentary called The Movies. In addition, I recommend a book called Turner Classic Movies, The Essential 52 Must-See Movies and Why They Matter, by Jeremy Arnold. Rob, studying the classics while still studying modern should be a privilege for us imagination connoisseurs, to where we should continue to have a wide range of storytelling knowledge so that we can understand where each film comes from by always filling in the blanks when it comes to being constantly knowledgeable about film and other storytelling mediums at all times. Rob, nice to write to you again, and it is important to stay versatile and consistent at the same time in our knowledge. Well, Agosa, Asula, what a great letter. And remember, you know what's funny to me is that at all times, movies used to be, at one time those movies were modern. And aren't we privileged, if you're a movie fan, that we actually have a way, like, we can still go back and watch films? I mean, you know, I think about movies like, I don't know why this always comes up. I don't know why I think about this movie a lot, but I think about The Verdict a lot. Sidney Lumet's The Verdict. By the way, Cardinal Sin, Gil is here. He's been a member for 22 months. Thanks, Gil. I appreciate that. I go back and watch The Verdict. The Verdict is a very quiet movie about a man who has one last chance to succeed or fail. The alcoholic Paul Newman delivering an incredible performance. He should have won an Academy Award for it, but didn't. But it's a movie now. A studio would never make it. It would be turned into a 10-part streaming series, and undoubtedly it would probably be great. But there's something about that story in a 2-hour time frame that just really, really works. And I miss that. I want to remind everybody that the new episode of the Designing Hollywood podcast went up today. And I interviewed Ellen Mirojnick. And Ellen Mirojnick did the costumes for like Wall Street and Black Rain and Fatal Attraction and Starship Troopers and Basic Instinct. She worked on all these great studio pictures. And when I was doing research before I interviewed her, it struck me that, my God, the studios aren't making any of these movies anymore. Like nothing, none of them. And it really kind of bummed me out. I'm like, why aren't they doing this anymore? But they just totally aren't. And, all these movies would be turned into streaming series now. But I miss the mid-range studio movie where they made really compelling dramas. I mean, a movie that presumed innocent. Harrison Ford, Raul Julia, Greta Scacchi, looking amazing. I love that movie, based on a Scott Turow novel. So good. And who would make that movie now? Again, it'd be a 10-part miniseries. But it was such a good movie. I miss the 2-hour adult-oriented drama or thriller. It really bums me out. I wish we got more of those movies. But we don't. And it's really kind of a bummer. Echo Base Network says, did the Game Chasers reach out to you on their movie? I don't think so. They might have. I don't think so. But they can. So tell them to find me, or maybe they did. I don't know. Cardinal Sins back. Gil says, Rob, great to see you on Robservations again. I'm dubious about Picard Season 3, but I'll check it out on your recommendation. Do you have a list of your favorite films on your website? Keep it up. You know what? I do not have a list of my favorite films on my website. I can throw some out to you. All About Eve, Sunset Boulevard, All That Jazz, Amelie, Almost Famous, The Godfather, Godfather 2, Apocalypse Now, Raiders Lost Ark, and Jaws. There's a lot. There's a lot, but off the top of my head, there you go. There's a few. But in my top 10 of all time, definitely All That Jazz. Definitely All About Eve. And probably Almost Famous. But All That Jazz is definitely All That Jazz and Amelie. Two of my favorite movies of all time. So I'd have to come down and actually write a list. One day I will. I promise. One day I will. Jonathan Namila keeps sending in tips, and he asks if it's easier to make a prequel show. I don't know why anybody would want to make a Star Trek prequel, because if you don't know Star Trek, you get tripped up in the lore, and you'll never make a satisfying show, which is a bummer. That's my problem with Star Trek Discovery. I don't believe it. They made a prequel series that doesn't look anything like the prequel series, with technology that is unrecognizable, as if to be from an entirely different show. I don't understand it at all. I'd love to see if they went beyond Voyager. Picard does, but... Jonathan goes on to say, Rob, if DC picks you to be their main producer, like Kevin Feige, you do great work at DC Comics, Rob. I pick you, Rob, the man, the myth, the legend. Well, I wouldn't mind producing a DC Comics film. I mean, I could do that. I'll tell you something. If someone said to me right now, Rob, you have carte blanche, you can make any Superman movie you want. You know what I would do? I would make a Superman for all seasons. If you've got that graphic novel, a Superman for all seasons, and I would do it lyrically. Not lyrically, I'd make it a very sweeping, romantic, just like the feeling you get when you read that graphic novel. Winter, spring, summer, fall. Superman for all seasons. That's what I would do. And it'd be a very different kind of a Superman movie, but it also wouldn't cost $200 million. I would do that, and I think it'd be fun to do. Jonathan goes on to say, Rob, I just got Waterworld on DVD, and it's amazing, epic. I need to upgrade Waterworld to 4K Blu-ray. I remember the Waterworld live show at Universal. Waterworld, I am in awe. Thank you recommending it to me. Oh, did I? Well, I'll tell you, there is a great version of Waterworld that Arrow put out, a box set that I have, that has I want to say it's got the it's a fan cut. It's not the Odysseus cut. It's something like that, but it's a fan cut of Waterworld. It's really, really great. Somebody in the chat says, Brandon Heaton says he's hearing that Super Pets is surprisingly good. You know what? I hope it is, because I was not impressed by the trailers. So anyway, yeah, and anyway, I mean, look, don't you want? I want everything to be good, but unfortunately, not everything is good. So, what can you do? Well, now you know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna end this impromptu Robservations. Ultimately, I think you guys should give Terry Metalis a chance. Look, give him one episode. It's not coming out for another 7 months or something. Give him an episode. If you don't like the first episode, you can tell me I'm wrong, and I'll tell me to fuck off. But I guarantee you, after episode 1, you're going to want to see what's happening. I'm telling you, you will. Lock the Coals says, do you have to watch Picard 1 and 2, or did they toss these in the trash for 3? Are references well integrated, or mostly just references for reference's sake? Oh, no. You know what? You can infer meaning. You don't have to watch Picard 1 and 2, seasons 1 and 2. There's stuff that they refer to, but you'll get it. You'll get it. Joshua Calkins asks, hi, Rob, did they fire everyone? How can season 3 be okay? Totally different showrunner. Terry Metalis had carte blanche, and he went for it. There's stuff in there. I mean, there's stuff I want to say, I want to talk about that I can't, but he went for it. He made it into his own. Authorship. And I said, look, don't believe me. The proof's in the pudding. Bet on the work. and watch it. And I'm telling you, people, you'll like it. People will come, Ray. People will definitely come. No, it's really good. Watch it. Well, on that note, everyone, I want to thank everybody for writing in. I want to thank my moderating staff. I want to thank Brian Hepburn. I want to thank Darren Seeley is here. I want to thank Tom Jr. Jackson because he's a goof person. I want to thank Brian Hepburn for being here and being moderators. So thank you very much. I want to thank everybody. You want to write me letters, I'll read them on the show. You can find me at postgeeksingularity.com. Write me a letter, and I will read it. So I will read it. So send me a letter. I'll read it on the show. I want to thank everybody generously for supporting this channel via super chats and tips and memberships. Thank you so much for that. And I will be back with a couple more Robservations this week. So, yeah, that should be fun. And thank you all for being here. And I can't complain. You guys are great. Thanks for listening to me. By the way, again, check out Star Trek Picard Season 3. And tell me if you don't like it. I think you will, but you're going to have to wait till February of 2023. And on that note, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I would say to all of you, have a better night.